Has it ever happened to you that you're working on a game made in Unity and you're using prefabs to composite the scene, and the prefabs are building blocks, and you wish Unity would just show you them as one object, but unfortunately, because maybe you're using nesting, as you should, the prefabs show with all their hierarchy. So whenever you click on the prefab a couple of times, it expands the hierarchy, shows all the objects, and it's very easy to make a mess. It's very easy to create overrides. So you basically wish like Unity was doing things a little bit more close to what Godot does, for instance. But you still like Unity and its workflow. So I've created something to achieve a little bit the best of both worlds. I call it Blackbox, and I've put it on the asset store. It's been there for 6 months and it's now reached version 1.7. So there's so much more than what it had in the beginning that I wanted to make a new video, and I wanted to show you all the opportunities. Because the video might be a little bit long, I will put chapters so you can just skip at the right time. To show you what I mean, let's start with this home platform prefab. This is a platform and it has some kind of like structure and objects that are intended to be moving or something. And obviously it comes as a prefab, and as I mentioned, as I expand the hierarchy, Unity will show me like all of the objects. So it's very easy that I'm working with it, but as I click a couple of times, then I end up selecting these objects, and sometimes you might even like move them by mistake. And if you're not very careful about undoing these changes, you might just like try to put the object back, and what happens is that you have created not only an override on the prefab, so that means that you can see it here in the blue line. That means that this prefab now has some kind of change in the scene that you don't know how to treat, and you might forget about it later on, right? And also you change the scene, so that can create conflicts. So how do I make this prefab an individual object with Blackbox? It's very simple. You start from the prefab, you enter prefab mode, and you add the Blackbox component. The Blackbox component, as you can see, comes as a simple component. It has a property called locked that you might want to leave on. And as you go back to the scene, you will notice that the prefab now shows up as one object, and Blackbox says prefab locked. So Blackbox basically only allows me now to change the base properties of this prefab, you know, the layer, the set active flag, the transform, and it also hides the component on the root. So now I can only change these properties here, and I can really use it as a building block. But you might be asking yourself, how do I access some of the things that this prefab has? For example, let's say that I want to move this door, right? And as you can see, by default, I cannot select it. So what you can do, you can open the prefab, you can select that door. And as I said, we want to basically expose the transform property, the position, on the black box in order to be able to modify it from the scene. So again, select the door, right click on the position property, black box, reveal as part of default. Default is the name of a list. I will explain it in a second. If I click that and I go back to the root, you will notice that the local position of the door has been revealed. I call it revealed on the black box. I can actually remove it if I wanted. This is showing me that this is a property of the transform component, and this shows me the game object that it comes from. You can see that Blackbox shows you the whole hierarchy. I made the mistake here of calling it door, but that's what it is. So here I can know which objects this belongs to, and I can actually rename it. I can call it door position if I wanted. And when I go back to the scene, this is called door position, and it allows me now to move my door. The cool thing, as you can understand, is that I can now use this prefab multiple times, and each prefab can have the door in a different position depending on whether I want to show it as closed or open. And this allows me to basically use this prefab in multiple copies with overrides, which is the beauty of the Unity prefab system, but without the complexity, which is the annoying part of the Unity prefab system. So you get the best of both worlds. You will also notice that this door position that I have renamed, that refers to the position on the transform, I can now revert and I can apply it to the original prefab. So if I revert it, then I should do it here actually, then you can see that the value goes back to the original on the prefab, and then I can override it again, and I can potentially apply it so that it becomes part of the prefab itself. One thing to notice is that as I make this modification, if you go to the overrides dropdown, you will notice that the modification is actually on the door transform. So it's not on the root, it's not on the Blackbox script, but it's on the object that actually has the property. Which means that if you have any script that relies on this property to be there, or the object to be there, or modifies the property later on, Blackbox doesn't interfere with your workflow in any way. Also to note is that Blackbox gets removed in a build, so it's a component that it's only at edit mode and it goes away as you build your game, so it has no impact on your game. But now, there's one more thing that I want to show you regarding safety. As I work on this prefab and maybe I made this modification, I can actually right-click and apply, like I did before, and I can apply this override and modify the original prefab asset. Sometimes you don't want that, right? Sometimes you want to allow people to modify these things, but you don't want them to be able to apply. You only want them to revert if they need to. Blackbox gives you that. You just need to go inside and you can disable apply. If I do that, if I go back to the to the scene, you can see that now if I right click on this property, I don't see apply anymore. I only see revert. And the overrides dropdown has been disabled in order for me not to be able to apply in mass all of the modifications. So now this prefab is kind of safe because I can actually use it and reuse it, but I will never be able to send these modifications to the original asset. So to make modification to the asset, I would have to go inside and make modifications intentionally, which means that I cannot break this prefab by mistake. This process you can repeat it many times. For instance, I could reveal the position of this lever object. You will notice that this lever object is actually another prefab that has been blackboxed, and it's already exposing the rotation here. So I could modify the rotation on the X. But what if I want to see this rotation on the exterior? It's actually pretty simple. Because this rotation has been revealed as part of the inner prefab, I can now go to the instance of this prefab inside the outer prefab and click reveal again. Blackbox, reveal as part of default, and you will see that now on the root I have the local rotation as well of the lever top. So if I go back to the scene, I can now see both positions and I can actually override this local rotation for this particular instance of the prefab. So you can see how Blackbox supports multiple prefabs nested into each other, and you can actually reveal properties from inner prefabs all the way up to the root. At this point, I just wanted to spend a second talking about lists. As you can see, whenever we have revealed something, we always have chosen which list to reveal it in. So for instance, like doing this, Blackbox reveal as part of default. This is because Blackbox supports multiple lists. By default, you don't see them, but if you do edit lists here, you can actually add multiple lists. And this allows you to create lists that are, for example, for level design, or you can make one for programmers. So this is telling you that whenever you reveal properties as part of these lists, and if I go back, you will see what I mean. So here in default, I have these two properties. Level designers supposedly will see these properties and programmers will see these properties. You're able to create multiple workflows based on the role or based, for instance, on whatever you're doing at the moment, right? So you're doing debugging and you have a list of things that can help you with debugging. So this allows you to create multiple workflows for different members of the team. For instance, if I go to this character prefab here I have exposed 3 different lists. One that I want to use at runtime for quick modifications, one that I use for configuring the character so I can make variations of this character that have different health or different bullets, and one that I will use when I'm working on the character controller for tests. So with this one I can just like tweak the speed movement, the movement of speed, sorry, the acceleration, deceleration. So as I work on this character, I can basically see only the things that matter to me at that particular moment. So it's not only for safety, but it's also for focus and for clarity. I can create multiple workflows using Blackbox. I actually want to take this moment to point out that you don't need to lock a prefab to get all of this workflow. So for instance, I could totally take this character and unlock it. And so I have the character with all its child objects, but I still see these three lists here. So workflows in Blackbox are not dependent on each other. You can actually use different properties, different features of Blackbox independent from each other. So this was the lists. As you can see here, I have three lists. And if I go back to this prefab here, I have all of these. And to change them again, I can go inside and I go to edit lists, and then I take list 5 and I delete it. I can delete, let's actually delete all of them, right? You can see that I can also like reorder them. I can empty it. I can choose to hide it temporarily. And I can actually choose to remove the grouping by GameObject. So for instance, if I do that on the default list, as I go back, you will see that the properties now, they don't show the GameObject header anymore. So that can be useful if you're trying to do something that is very compact. But I like it, so I will go inside and I will actually enable it again. So you see that now they show it again. And again, by hovering, I can see the hierarchy, so I can have more clarity of which object I'm working on. In addition to individual properties, you can actually reveal many other things. I've done it by going to the object itself. You can actually also reveal things by going to this button, show available properties and methods. So for instance, if I remove these properties for now, and I click this button again, you see that Blackbox can show me like all of the children, and I can then explore, say that I want to explore the reflection probe that's here. I can then see the base game object properties. I can reveal the properties themselves. I can reveal references to the object. I'll talk about that in a second. Or if you go to components, you can reveal methods, public methods. So if you have public methods that have a void return type, you can actually reveal them as buttons. I use this reveal of methods, for instance, here on these computer objects. You can see that they basically draw a gizmo of which computer is connected to what. And if I select the platform computer 1 prefab, I have revealed a method. If you go inside, you can see that this is a method from the logic game object called goToConnected in scene view. And basically, so it's, if I click here, actually it pings the object, so I can see it's here. So this script has this method return void. And so here I can reveal it, and that creates this button. And now I can click this button to send me to whichever computer this one was connected to. So it's just a handy method to basically find whatever this prefab is connected to. And I can reveal it on the Blackbox just like that, like many other properties. And I can even I can even reorder it by doing this. You can see that now the button appears at the top. So this was for methods. We've seen properties, we've seen methods. You can actually, let's go back to this prefab here. Let's go inside, show available properties and methods. Going back to the reflection probe, you can actually reveal entire components inspectors. So this is very useful if a component has a custom way of being drawn. So you don't just want to reveal individual properties, but you can choose to reveal the entire inspector. And if you go back here, you will see that now the reflection probe component shows up in its entirety, and it has its gizmos, and all of the things will work exactly like you would expect it to. And you can actually collapse it, and you will remember the state. So you can actually reveal entire components, and then whenever you go here, you can just see them whenever you need to see them. In addition to the ability to reveal entire components, you can also reveal all of the properties individually. So that's very useful because sometimes you have components that have a long list of properties. that you made, usually is when you make a component, and you want to reveal them all, except maybe these two, right? So what you can do here is you reveal them all individually, and you can see that on the black box now we created like a monster, like they are all revealed, which is what you wanted. But then you just want to remove this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. So you can then customize the reveal as you need it. And then when you go back to the scene, you just see the properties that you need and not the entire component. So Blackbox gives you, again, a lot of flexibility in how you want to customize the appearance of the component. And if I go back in and I put too many properties, I can always go into edit lists. And instead of reordering, I just empty the list and I remove them all. So now the list is clean again. And if I go back to the scene, the black box is clean again. In addition to the button that is on the Blackbox component, this one to show available properties and methods, you can always go around your prefab and reveal things by, for example, just like right-clicking a component, Blackbox, and then here you can reveal the entire components inspector, a reference to the component or all properties individually, like I showed you before, or you can right-click on a property to reveal that property individually. So there are shortcuts, so you don't always have to go to the root of the prefab to configure the black box, but you can just go to the object and just reveal what you want to reveal. So we've seen how to reveal properties and components and methods, but there's one more thing that you can reveal on the black box. Let's say that we have this big prefab, this platform boss encounter, and there's the boss inside. The boss is a character that is just here on the root. And I want a reference to something on the root of this prefab, like for example, let's take the root itself, right? So let's take the transform. So what I want to do is I want to expose this transform here so that, for instance, I can create a Cinemachine camera. And if I position this camera, let's say that I position it here, I want this camera to now point at the boss. And for that, I need a reference for the tracking target property of Cinemachine. And if I click here, I will be able to see all of the objects that are like on the root, but I'm not able to see the boss because the hide flags are hiding it. So one quick way to do this with Blackbox is very simple. You just go to the prefab you want to reveal something on, and I've actually already done it here, but I'm going to do it again. And then you select the object you want to reveal something from. Let's say, for instance, I want to reveal this enemy boss transform. Right-click, Blackbox, reference to component, and then you choose in which list you want it to go. So you click that in the root on the Blackbox. Now I have two of them, so I'm actually going to remove one. You get a reference. It says here a reference to enemy boss transform. So this is actually referencing the component I just right-clicked. I can rename it like usual. And then when you go back to the scene, you get this field, which is looks like an object field, but actually you cannot remove it. The only thing you can do is you can copy a reference to it. So this acts as a window inside the prefab, inside the inner objects that you don't see. So you can now copy a reference to it. You go to the Cinemachine camera, you paste. And then the Cinemachine camera is now pointing. Sorry, I need to add the rotation control. So rotation composer, and then you can see that the camera is now pointing to the boss. So if I go to the game view and I dock it here, you can notice that the camera now points at the hidden object, because the object is still there. As I said, Blackbox hides things, but it doesn't delete anything. It doesn't modify the hierarchy. So it's very transparent to your game code. And as such, it's very transparent to Cinemachine's camera code. So you can see how Blackbox allows you to reveal not only properties and entire components, but also like references to use. You can do things like, for example, you can reveal an active flag of an object. Like, for instance, here in this platform boss encounter, I can potentially take all of these objects, the dynamic objects that are part of the platform, and I can reveal the active flag on the black box, and I can rename it something like pickups or power-ups or something. And then as I go back, now I have the ability for this massive prefab to just enable and disable the pickups by just like toggling this property. And again, for extra safety, I can make sure that this apply is disabled so that this property cannot be applied and no one using this prefab is able to break it, because I'm using this prefab in other places and I just don't want all of the pickups to be disabled or the boss character to be disabled on all of the instances of this prefab. So now whoever is using this prefab can disable the pickups, but they can never mess with the original asset unless I really intend to, which means that you have to go inside prefab mode and make your changes. But that's more of a different workflow. So Blackbox can really like add clarity to what you're doing in the scene and avoid a lot of like conflicts, because you can only expose the things you really want people to override by revealing them on the black box. Other cool things of Blackbox is that you can actually go into project settings. In the Blackbox settings, you can choose that Blackbox is auto-added to new prefabs and to new prefab variants if you want. So this makes it so that you're always using Blackbox, and you can choose that they have disable apply by default. And you can also actually disable Blackbox temporarily on all prefabs. So if I do this, you can see in the hierarchy how the prefabs are unlocking, all of them, even though they are theoretically locked. So here it says prefab locking has been disabled globally. But the interesting thing of this workflow, as you can see, I can auto add Blackbox to prefabs, but you can always go back and take this platform, boss encounter prefab, and remove Blackbox. I'm not going to do it, otherwise I lose all my references. But I can do it, for example, here on the loot box, remove Blackbox, and then this prefab just now acts like usual. So Blackbox is not a destructive workflow, it's not something that changes your game. It's just something you use as long as you need it, and then you can remove it or add it again, or, you know, make it automatic. And again, as you build the game, the prefabs will get the components stripped, so Blackbox doesn't have any impact on your game. Another couple of things that I've added in recent versions is this ability to control how prefabs behave in when used as nested. So for instance, this loot box prefab that has the black box and it looks locked, I can actually go in and tweak the behavior and say that this component stays unlocked, keeps unlocked when it's nested. So this means that now that I go back here, I can see the loot box and this one here, they are unlocked, so they show their children because they're nested as part of home platform. But if I were to take this prefab and just use it in the scene as it is, I will see it as locked. So the prefab is locked, but when nested, it keeps unlocked. And if I deselect this one again, I can see that this one is locked and the one inside the home platform is now also locked. So to show you the behavior of unlocking as a prefab variant route, I have to go to the boss encounter platform. And if I go just to this computer here called boss computer, this is a variant. So if I go inside, I will see that like there's a prefab variant route, which comes from another prefab called computer. So if I go inside computer, I find an object called logic. And this is what has the computer script. But if I go back in the variant, I only see overridden objects to it. I don't see logic. But if I go inside and I choose to keep it unlocked, if it is a variant route, then I see logic again and I can make tweaks to it. So I can basically use this variant as if it was unlocked. But then if I just use the computer prefab as usual like I did before, then it will look locked to me if I use it in the scene or in another prefab. So this is just to show you how flexible this workflow can be. So I can now go inside again and I can choose to make it always locked and then use it inside platform boss encounter and it looks locked. And then when I go back, of course, it disappears completely because it's a child of a locked prefab. Locked prefab inside nested prefab inside another locked prefab. Basically, Blackbox supports a lot of the workflows that Unity provides with nesting and variants out of the box, I could say. So after this joke, I think I've shown you everything. Thank you for watching all the video up to this point. And if you're interested, as I was making this video, Blackbox is on offer, 50% off on the asset store. So I would suggest to hurry. Otherwise, if you watch this video at another time, it might not be anymore. But I hope you enjoy the video. I hope you pick up Blackbox and you find it useful. And if you do, if you pick it up, please leave a review. That would be super helpful. Thank you so much and see you next time.